The Vikings just completed the biggest comeback in NFL history. Let's talk about how it went down here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Boy, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. You can find this show on Amazon Fire Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. So the Vikings won a game, overtime 39-36. I'm sure there are things in that description of the game that are getting lost. This is going to be the comeback game. I mean, this is the comeback game in a year of comeback. What's this, like the fifth or sixth fourth quarter comeback the Vikings have made? They were down 33-0 at halftime. I mean, we were talking about firing people all last week. If you talked to me in the second quarter of this game and you asked, is Ed Donatel getting fired tomorrow? I'd be like, I don't know, maybe. Like, I would have considered that as a possibility more than I ever have, despite him being a first-year guy. And yet, I was actually like kind of wrong about that. I'll get into it. I mean, we were all wrong about a whole bunch of stuff, right? If you were mad in the first half of this game, that's okay. That is natural. And I'm sure it made the second half of the game that much more enjoyable. You got to have the lows to have the highs. That's how life works. So I think the best way to do this one is to just kind of go blow by blow and talk about it. But I guess the most important thing here is the Vikings clinch the NFC North. That's the Vikings win the division. Let's do it. Awesome. They get their first one in the first year under Kevin O'Connell. Their first division win with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. It's going to be their second playoff appearance with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback. Really exciting stuff. They get to play a home playoff game, and if they can hang on to that 2 seed, they would even possibly get 2 home playoff games, or at least be guaranteed 2 home playoff games. What's kind of funny is that a tie, which became a bit of a possibility at the end there, would have also clinched the division. And it wouldn't have actually affected any NFC seeding stuff either, because the Vikings don't have tiebreakers on any of the teams they're likely to be in contention with, namely San Francisco, a little bit Philadelphia or Dallas. They don't have tiebreakers on any of those teams. So whether they get a win or a tie, it actually functionally works out the same way. So that game-winning kick didn't actually change anything standings-wise. But it did secure, the greatest comeback in history, and that just wouldn't hit the same if it were a tie. So first half is where all the bad stuff happened, right? And there was a lot of same old, same old. I will say right now, the Colts did not move the ball as much as it felt like they were when the score was getting out of hand. But when they did, it was the same thing. It was that same quarter, half, middle of field's wide open, skinny posts and digs over the middle all day long. Just middle throw, middle throw, middle throw, middle throw. Everybody does it. Everybody sees it, the last team doing it, and everybody says, all right, we'll do that, and it works, right? Super frustrating stuff. Absolutely terrible pass protection. Kirk Cousins was holding the ball way too long. There were times when, it looked like the reads were just going slow, and maybe they were slowing it down, because when you could see the wide receivers, it looked like they were putting, like Justin Jefferson was putting a lot of extra window dressing on the route. So maybe it was that. But either way, things were just going way too slow on offense. They got 2 first downs that they earned, and I think 1 by penalty in the entire first half. 47 yards passing. Pathetic performance. But I think the real thing was like going through this catastrophes. So many catastrophes. A blocked punt touchdown, a pick 6 for a touchdown, a 4th and 1 on your own 31 that you didn't get, a fake punt on your own 31 that you didn't get, setting up all of these short fields, and the game just sort of rolled out of hand. Couple of really long kick returns to about midfield also happened. There was so much stuff, and it made it look like, gosh, this defense is so bad. And I was even thinking, God, this is so bad. And there were critiques of the defense to make in that first half. Like, they certainly would not have been absolved of blame. But listen to this. So there were 8 scores that the Indianapolis Colts achieved. 3 touchdowns, 5 field goals. Adds up to 36 points. So look at the starting field position of those drives. The first one, opening kickoff, long kick return, Indianapolis 48-yard line turns into a field goal. The second score was a block punt touchdown. The third score started on the Colts 34, which is pretty good field position. That was a field goal. That was set up by the fumble, by a Dalvin Cook fumble. The 2 fourth downs were consecutive drives, both setting the Colts up at the 31-yard line, at the Vikings 31-yard line. One was a touchdown, one was a field goal. I believe 3 and out and then a field goal. There was the pick six, and then a 2-minute warning drive, a 2-minute drill drive that started at the Colts 26. So that's like a good sustained drive that got in and turned into a field goal. And then one field goal in the second half that was another long kick return and a 52-yard score. So they got like 1 first down and then kicked, basically. It's not like they were marching down the field all day. They had one drive that was a 2-minute warning drive that was pretty bad that they marched down the field. Now, getting the ball at midfield and getting it to like point blank range like they did on the opening drive and then kicking a chip shot field goal, that was bad. And there was bad stuff, but it certainly wasn't all on the defense. There was a lot of special teams and a lot of offense that led to the Vikings getting into that hole. And ultimately, I think as we kick on the tape and we start thinking a little bit more about what the players did, what mistakes they did or didn't make, I think we'll be a little happier with the defense than we were before. But what I really want to focus on is kind of how they got into those situations and a couple of decisions that got them there. Obviously, the block punt looked like a protection bust to me, just people blocking the wrong dudes. And I think Andrew DePaula ended up blocking 2 guys at the same time, turned into a total disaster. There were the 2 fourth downs I thought were really interesting decisions. You were already trailing by a lot by that point. Going for it on 4th and 1 on your own 31 is pretty deep to go for it. Most coaches wouldn't do that, but there is like a principle of analytics, and a lot of the like 4th down analytics is trained on like, look, there's no punish for losing the game by more. So your only avenue to win, I think, is to make those 4th downs or to make the greatest comeback in history. But to not get in that position, the only way to win is to pick your spot and go get a yard when you need one. And they should have just been able to get a yard. That was a pretty bad offensive series. And then I think the same logic with the fake punt, although I think the fake punt was forcing it a little. When they went for a fake punt against New Orleans in London, that's because they saw something on tape that they could take advantage of. And, they saw the way that they responded when the gunners lined up a certain way and you could get somebody alone. This was, we're forcing it. We're going to run that fake punt play, and Jalen Naylor now has to make a contested catch because the Colts didn't have that particular problem. This is going to be, you're going to be covered. You got to beat someone, and he couldn't. And the ball was high and stuff. This is not exactly Kirk and Justin Jefferson, right? So I thought that some of that stuff was forced, and some of it I think was warranted aggression as a way to try to get back into the game. And the fact that the deficit got even worse because of them and they still came back just makes the comeback all that much more impressive. Okay, we got the bad stuff out of the way, right? We took our medicine, we ate our dinner. Let's go to dessert next and go over all the big things that led to that comeback. The real question, oh my goodness, how did they do it? And later, I also want to just talk about like how to feel, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about processing a game that starts so bad, but actually ends up so good. And how do you deal with the fact that 1 hour ago you were calling for heads to roll? We'll get into that. Do a little bit of group therapy, I guess. Before that, this episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Therapy is very important. Especially fellas, all right? We got to take care of our mental, as some like to say. And it's very important. And therapy is not a crisis thing. In my opinion, it's not somewhere you go when you're having some problem that you just can't deal with. No, it's maintenance. It's a way to find a better you. I think that's the best way to do it. To me, it's like going to the gym, but for your mind. So whether you have done therapy before or you haven't, BetterHelp can help you get acquainted with a therapist. They can help you choose between different options. Finding the right therapist is just as important as deciding to do therapy in the first place. And BetterHelp will have you fill out a little questionnaire, and they'll help you match with somebody who can actually serve your needs. So get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Also, look, hiring is a nightmare. It is a very difficult process, and it can feel like you're making this huge, high-stakes bet for your company, especially if it's a small business. And what resources do you have to help you? That is where LinkedIn Jobs can help you out, because you're probably dealing with a completely insane stack of resumes and applicants. LinkedIn Jobs can expose you to that large of a market. I mean, it's LinkedIn. They've got a huge pool of job-seeking people, but they also have screening questions and other tools that help you narrow down who you actually want to hire, somebody that's right for you and your company and its culture and its needs, that's always going to be unique to you. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Now, I'm sure you're going to want to bask in this game forever. You can hear me talk about it on Locked On NFL. I'll probably talk about it a little bit on Locked On Sports today on Monday morning. But if you really want to dive deep, you can find my Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, with some film breakdowns and stuff to help you make sense of exactly how something like this can happen both to the Vikings and then to the Colts. But let's talk about the broad strokes of that comeback. So it's halftime. They're down 33-0. And according to both Cousins and O'Connell, Patrick Peterson goes up to a bunch of offensive players and, 12-year veteran, right? Like, he's seen everything. And he says, you just get 5 touchdowns. They can't score on us. They can't move the ball on us. So you just get your 5 touchdowns. That'll be enough. 5 touchdowns. Easy, right? And Kirk Cousins was thought it was a joke, and he wasn't joking. And it turned out that was the spark that they need. But to me, I thought the spark that they needed was from KJ Osborn. Happened on the second drive of the third quarter. KJ Osborn gets a big catch up the seam, and then he's fighting for other yards. And he did a little bit in the second quarter too. He was the only player that seemed to be fighting for more yards. Even Justin Jefferson was just diving down. And some of that is the angles and the way that the after catch part works. That's the right move. But KJ seemed to have so much more fight than the rest of the Vikings. And that's what I was really going to get mad at. I was going to come on this show and rip the Vikings and question their culture and all that stuff. Because it seemed like they weren't fighting. It seemed like they were totally asleep, that they got behind, they got punched in the mouth, and they were just kind of packing it in. And there was a lack of urgency in the way the Vikings were playing, except KJ Osborn. And as that made a couple plays, converted a first down in the second quarter, got another big explosive in the third quarter, you could feel it start to permeate the rest of the team. And I really think that KJ Osborn lifted this team to be able to make that comeback. And then you get to everybody else doing everything. And trust me, everybody gets a moment in this game. But far be it from me to say that it was just KJ Osborn, but I do think he was the spark. He did score the first of 4 passing touchdowns on Kirk Cousins, who was phenomenal in the second half. I mean, just legendary MVP level play in the second half. The second scoring drive, so they got 3 touchdown drives in a row. First one was KJ Osborn. The second one had a bunch of explosives, like an explosive run, a couple of bigger passes. And then suddenly they were dinking their way all the way down to point blank range, 1st and 10 from the 2-yard line. CJ Ham drums it in. That drive felt like the Colts went to a really soft clock killing, prevent kind of thing. And it was 10 minutes left in the third. It was way too early to do that. And the Vikings took advantage. And then they tightened up the next drive, but it didn't matter. The Vikings still managed to move the ball. Justin Jefferson had found some rhythm. Some of the grossest Justin Jefferson stuff happened on that next drive, including a touchdown on Stephon Gilmore. That is just disgusting. The route is just absolutely disgusting on Stephon Gilmore. The word unguardable came to mind. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is one of the league's best corners. And he has been one of the league's best corners, and it's impossible. You just can't guard a route like that. He faked a return, went outside. It was gorgeous. And then suddenly, you've scored 3 times. Suddenly it's 21-36. They got one field goal in the second half. So 21-36 all of a sudden. You're going, wait a minute, that's a 15-point game. With a chance to get a fourth consecutive score, Justin Jefferson gets absolutely blasted by Stephon Gilmore on a high point. Turns into a 15-yard penalty. He's got to go out for concussion protocol for it. For what it's worth, I'm going to complain about the refs a lot. I actually think that was a bit of a call the Vikings got. Gilmore led with his shoulder. There was no helmet-to-helmet contact. I think it was like a hitting too hard foul, which is not the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be enforced, but it is enforced that way sometimes. Either way, concussion protocol. Jalen Reagor comes out, runs like a pylon, like a post over the middle, like a deep over kind of thing, and he just stops his route. And the pick six in the first half was also Jalen Reagor turning the wrong way on what looked like a choice route to me, and then Cousins throwing it to the wrong place ends up right in the hands of the nickel, and they were on like way backed up there on like the 10-yard line, so it was just a waltz right in. So I think you could make a pretty good argument, and that's the argument that I would make, that both of Cousins' interceptions were specifically on Jalen Reagor, specifically on the one play he had to come in because Justin Jefferson looked hurt. The first time Jefferson came down, he got a rib contusion, I think is what Kevin O'Connell called it. Got a big hit on the chest, and he had to come out for a little bit, but he's going to be okay. Thank goodness. So that's really rough, right? And you're going, oh, good. There's like 8 minutes left in the game at that point after on that interception. They're still down 15 points. They got the ball on the 2-yard line, though, so maybe you get a quick stop. Maybe you can get back into this. And that's exactly what happens. They get a quick stop, and then they get the ball with really good field position on the like 40 or 50. And then a Thielen drive, an explosive play to Adam Thielen, another big long one to KJ Osborn, and then Thielen on a smash concept in the red zone, or with a high-low in the red zone. Colts bust the coverage, Thielen wide open, good throw, good catch, touchdown Vikings. It is there they should have gone for two, and I'll talk about that coaching decision right now. When you're down 15, you have to go for 2 points, either the first touchdown or the second touchdown, right? You should do it the first time because then you have more information about what your situation is and you can act accordingly, right? If you're down 9 points with, say, 4 minutes to go, you're going to behave differently than if you're down 7 points with 4 minutes to go. You want to know that, versus if you're down 8 points with 4 minutes to go, you're probably just going to treat it like a 1-score game, and then the 2-point conversion is actually for the game. But there is a scenario if you go for it early where you don't get it, but then you do hurry up differently, you use your timeouts differently, and you actually get a chance to win the game on a field goal. Turned out to be a moot point in this game because the Vikings did get the 2-point when they got it, but still, that's something worth noting. Hey, why did they wait to go for 2? I don't think you should. Either way, touchdown Thielen, 8-point game. At this point, the defense cannot afford to give up but a first down, let alone any scoring. And they basically don't. They get quick stops like every single time from here on out. The defense absolutely steeled itself the second the Colts had to drive down the field. And that's why, you go back to 5 minutes left in the second quarter, it's 30-0, and you're going, my goodness, we still have a lot of this game left, and they haven't really made a drive yet? Hang on. Actually, can they do something? Oh, no, it's ridiculous. That's 30 points. But you go back to that moment and think, hey, maybe that thought that crept into your head wasn't the craziest thing in the world, even though you just wanted to be responsibly cynical. Anyways, on the way back, the Colts are driving and they fumble. Here's where I'm going to complain about the refs. They fumble standing up. Shannon Sullivan picks it up and his uncontested scoop score walk-in touchdown. That would have been the tie game. The officials blew that ball dead, calling down by contact. Now, he was not close to down by contact. It was the easiest overturn you'll ever see. It was one of the worst down by contact calls I have ever seen in my life. And that wasn't the first time that it happened. You were probably yelling at your screen saying, why haven't you talked about this yet? There was another one that was, I think it was Jordan Hicks on Alec Pierce, was tackling him in the flat, and he was fighting for yards. They had the quickest whistle calling forward progress. Now, that ball was stripped out. Shannon Sullivan, same guy, picked it up and would have been a scoop and score if it were properly called. But forward progress was called. Now, watching that play, to me, I do not see a point where forward progress looks stopped. I see guys fighting for yardage, and the way that they blew the whistle the rest of that game, there were so many times, frustratingly so as a Vikings fan, where Zach Moss or Deion Jackson were fighting for extra yardage and getting 2-3 yards just with extra physicality. And that's part of the reason I was saying, hey, they looked really soft. They didn't have fight, was because of those fighting moments. And there were little moments where the momentum stops and then it starts going again. I mean, you're pushing, right? Calling forward progress in that situation is maddeningly inconsistent. It's a terrible forward progress call, unchallengeable, and cost the Vikings a touchdown. This one was even less excusable. This more recent one, he just wasn't down at it. Like, it was just a miss. And calling it down by contact, like, look, if you're not sure, let that thing play out. And then you can call it down by contact and return it. The only reason not to is, hey, if you're like absolutely sure, don't let him play everything out because there's injury risk. But in a situation like that, blowing that whistle is like neglectful, if not like downright rigged. And look, 85% of the money was on the Vikings in this one. I'll leave it at that. So to finish up this game, the momentum is clearly changed, right? So we'll get into the finish of this game, and I guess just a little bit of powwow on how to feel about it, I guess. But we'll get into it. First, today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a really cool way to play daily fantasy. It's incredibly easy. You just put a few entries in, your favorite like 2 to 5 players, and it's stuff like Patrick Mahomes. I think he's going to throw for more than 320 passing yards, or Justin Jefferson, more than half a touchdown, that kind of thing. They have projections on any sport, NFL, MLB, NASCAR, everything down to esports and cricket and disc golf, like whatever. And they are currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That means if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. Deposit 50, get 50, etc. Go enter promo code Locked On at sign up on prizepicks.com or on the PrizePicks app to get an instant deposit match up to $100. So we pick things up. The Vikings just got the ball back. Everybody's mad about that call. US Bank Stadium is practically bursting into flames, and the Vikings drive down a little bit, but thanks to a 15-yard penalty that was assessed on Chandon Sullivan, who took his helmet off in frustration after receiving one of the worst calls I have ever seen in my life, that is enough to keep them out of field goal range on a 4th and 15. But punting it is weird because they're like still over the midfield stripe. So punting it is only worth like 25 expected yards of field position. So Kevin O'Connell goes for it. Now, personally, I still would have punted it. I just like the way that Ryan Wright had been playing, and I like his ability to at least get it to like the 10-ish. He's been pretty consistent at that. But he goes for it on a 4th and 15. Cousins is pressured. He has to scramble. There is space, and it looked for a second like there maybe was a chance, but he gets ankle tackled from behind by Dayo Odenigbo. Not Ifeadi Odenigbo, who, of course, former Viking, was responsible for the blocked punt that led to a touchdown, as well as a couple sacks in this game, in a moment we will get to later. Also, Yannick Ngakoue had a couple sacks in this game. Somebody actually submitted that to Bold Predictions. I didn't pick it, but good job. But it gave the Colts a dicey situation. Your ball on the 40, field goal ices it, right? Basically right where we were for the Lions game last week. But this time the defense got it stopped. They got it down to a 4th and inches sneak and actually stopped Matt Ryan from being able to get there on, of all things, a fairly quick forward progress whistle. They ended up measuring it, and that's a really difficult thing to challenge. So it was a call stands deal, even though it was reviewed. And then the very next play, the Vikings, of all things, set up a screen. They've been abysmal at the screen game all season long. They set up a screen to Dalvin Cook. Phenomenal blocks out in space by Ezra Cleveland and Christian Darrisaw. And Dalvin Cook ends up weaving through the space, turning on the Jets, and housing it. It was one of the more exciting plays. And at that point, US Bank Stadium erupted like Pompeii. The atmosphere was a playoff atmosphere in there. And I do want to shout it. If you were at the game making a bunch of noise, shout outs to you. I always say, if you're at the game and you make a bunch of noise, if you're ever there when the crowd got so loud that the other team had to take a timeout, which did happen in this game, pat yourself on the back, and you get to say we when talking about the Vikings forever. You've contributed. Congratulations. It wasn't much. It was just your voice among 60,000, but it was something. And it's, I always say that, when people who get weird about like, what do you mean we won the game? Were you on the sidelines? Well, no, but I was making noise and it cost a false start. So I'd say that's good enough. Either way, 2-point conversion to win it. And at this point, we've had touchdowns from 4 of 5 principal skill players: Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborn, and Dalvin Cook. The only one who hasn't gotten in the action is TJ Hawkinson. And who does the 2-point conversion go to? TJ Hawkinson catches it on a quick little slant over the middle, absolute rifle of a pass. And Cousins in particular, I haven't talked about him a lot because there's just so much going on here, but this is a legacy moment for him. I mean, this is put your cleats in the Hall of Fame kind of game, because this thing broke the record, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to hear that happened. But God, what a game. That ties the game. You're at 36-36. Trade a couple punts to end regulation, including a phenomenal one from Ryan Wright, and trade a couple punts at the end of overtime, with about 2 minutes left in overtime. So we're talking like win or tie at this point, which, by the way, at that point, all of my stress melted away because I knew that like it wouldn't affect the standings. So I was like, man, I really want this win. But it was kind of like watching a preseason game you really want to win, where you're like, okay, there's no actual stakes. I just want this for like the vibe of it and the meaning, like just for the heart of it, So that was helpful to me, at least. But 2 minutes driving down, no timeouts. They had to use all their timeouts one of them they had to use on a Christian Darrisaw injury timeout because he was cramping, which happened to a bunch of players, by the way. A whole bunch of players left at the end of this game. I'm pretty sure it was like all cramps because they all played like 150 plays. Like, it was ridiculous. So no timeouts, driving down with like 2 minutes to go, like 50 seconds to go by the time they actually got close to field goal range. The Vikings did get a drive going. They got a completion to Justin Jefferson, and Afadio Denebo was the one who made the tackle, and he laid on him for way too long. Now, this is the part where the rules and the enforcement of the rules sort of differ. You're not supposed to do that, but if you make it look enough like an accident, they're going to let you get away with it 99 times out of 100. Afadio Denebo did not do a good enough job of making it look like an accident. He laid on him way too long. The Vikings still did get the ball clocked with a minute to go. With a second to spare. But it took like 16 seconds to get back on the ball. It was way too much finagling. 15-yard penalty on the Colts makes it a 40-yard field goal for the win, and Greg Joseph his money. The Vikings completed that comeback, and nobody's ever done that. The Music City Miracle was the biggest comeback in NFL history before that, a record that stood for 30 years. 1992, Bills versus Oilers. You remember the one. Frank Reich of all people too, which is so funny that it's Frank Reich's old team. I'm still speechless about it. Like, you can feel me search for words and not be able to find them. But here's what I'll say. We all had reactions in the first half. All right. I did. You did. You probably texted somebody. You maybe posted on Facebook. Maybe you posted on Twitter. Maybe you were just talking to somebody and you said, gosh, this team is awful. I wish everybody fired, blah, blah, blah. And when something like this happens that's like this improbable, I think it's really lame to go back through all that stuff and be like, oh, what do you think now? That just sucks. Like, people have emotions. And when you are going through a game like this, or a game like Dallas, which is what this game felt like for a while, where it just is, you're just mad, right? I think experiencing emotion in sports is a part of what makes sports beautiful. And I think when you go back and say you experienced the wrong emotion because the Vikings made the comeback, I think you're trying to take that away from people in a sense. And I don't think you should do it. That's why I say all the time on Twitter, like, game day tweets don't count. Say whatever. Feel whatever you got to feel. Say whatever you got to say. Nobody should be held to account for what they said when their team was trailing 33-0, assuming that would not be an eventual win. And if you were somebody who like kept the faith and you were like, nah, they'll come back. More power to you. Absolutely take your victory lap. But don't try to suppress the emotion of watching sports, because the bad emotions make the good emotions better. And if you take one away, you're kind of taking the other away. And then you might as well just be refreshing the Game Center on ESPN.com and watching the play-by-play, because you've taken the human element for yourself out of it. I mean, look, I won't tell anybody how to enjoy or not enjoy sports. You do whatever it is that makes you happy. You're valid and I love you. But I don't know. It's okay to get emotional in the middle of a game. In fact, I think it's important to let yourself be that, feel that, right? As long as you're expressing it, in a healthy way, punch holes in your wall or anything like that. If something improbable happens, what you thought an hour before that happened is not made invalid. And that's just a lesson for life, all right? If something improbable happens, your thoughts before that are not invalid just because you didn't see something really unlikely coming. That's, I guess, where I will end this. We got Twitter Tuesday tomorrow, or on Tuesday, so get in your questions. I know it's weird to have a Sunday episode. So there will not be a Monday episode. I'm not going to do 6 this week or anything. It's just the Monday episode a day earlier. So get your questions in. You got a couple days to do it. A little extra time. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBrownNFL or at Locked On Vikings for those questions. You can send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can also fill out the Google form in the show notes or leave a YouTube comment if you're watching on YouTube. You can also fill out the Google form in the show notes. You can leave a YouTube comment if you're watching on YouTube. And by the way, check out the show notes or the YouTube description for a way to win a Vikings jersey. I'm doing the raffle on Christmas, so you have till Christmas to get your bunny donations in. And the more you donate, the more raffle tickets you get. That's how it works. So get that in there. I will see you all on Tuesday. And as always, Skull.